Hey everyone, it's Jen.
And this is Lindsay.
And welcome back to Corpus Delicti, the podcast. We are still going strong with our missing persons episode.
Yeah, so when we were discussing how to approach this series, we had that discussion of, is this missing persons as far as something criminal happened and it's really sad and tragic and upsetting? And then we were like, do we cross over into kind of the D.B. Cooper, Amelia Earhart realm? This one I kind of feel like sits somewhere in between, which is really intriguing because, of course, we don't know what happened, but the theories and the thought processes are all over the place. Also, one quick note, and I know that we just were off, but we are going to be off next week. This was planned ahead of time, but I'm actually out of town. I will actually be where this story happened. We're going to New York to visit my husband's family. And we're gone for like a week. So it just not time to record and edit and all that, unfortunately. So
And if we did, it would be so piecemeal, it wouldn't be worth publishing.
That's exactly right.
So in this week's episode, we are talking about the disappearance of Judge Joseph Crater. He was the New York Supreme Court judge, and the newspapers at the time called him the most missingest man in America at the time.
He was born in Pennsylvania on January 5th, 1889, so definitely an older story. So keep in mind throughout this story that DNA, non-existent, forensics, very, very scratch the surface. So we don't really have a lot to go on as far as what police were able to do. He was the oldest sibling in his family, and his mom, Layla Montague, and his dad, Frank Ellsworth, had 4 kids total. Judge Crater studied at Lafayette College and went to Columbia University, and that's where he got his law degree. And he was a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity.
While in college, he met Stella Wheeler. She was already married at the time, which caused a problem. Crater, being a gentleman as he was, he helped her get a divorce so they could get married later that spring of 1917. Crater is a very well-dressed and very well-spoken man, and during the beginning of his career, he worked as a law clerk and eventually worked himself into a job as the secretary of the New York Supreme Court Justice Robert Wagner. Side note, this is not the American actor who played Austin Powers' number 2 man. That was 1997. This Wagner is from the 1800s.
So once his boss, Wagner, was elected to the U.S. Senate, Crater began practicing law at Wagner's law firm, and he worked really closely with Wagner. He starts learning the tricks of the trade, and Wagner became what we would now call a mentor to Crater. And Crater was, by all accounts, a good lawyer. He was good at his job, and he did so well that he was able to buy an apartment on 5th Avenue in New York in 1927. And this apartment was actually a gift to Stella, his now wife. They also lived part-time in the summer months in Belgrade Lakes, Maine.
During this time, he was making political connections and working the good old boy smoking cigars in the backroom strategy. And to be honest, it worked. Because in April 1930, Franklin D. Roosevelt, yes, this is the president, but at this time he was just the governor of New York, Roosevelt appointed Crater as the New York Supreme Court Justice. Roosevelt appointed Crater instead of the man backed by Tammany Hall. Now, it is kind of important that you remember this because it does come into play just a little bit later when we discuss theories.
This position was specifically over the trial courts. So the highest court in New York then was actually the Court of Appeals. So he published an opinion on fraudulent conveyances and mortgage foreclosure fraud. He's really building up his resume here. He's getting involved. He's wheeling and dealing, doing all these things, getting his name out there. But then the Great Depression hits and the nation is struggling. Well, not our judge, not Crater. He was making $25,000 a year. Again, long time ago. Let's put that in today's money. This is well over $350,000 a year, which is potentially sending up some red flags because, again, this is the Depression. Everybody is hurting. So now we go to April 2nd, 1930. Stella and Judge Crater are enjoying their summer place in Maine, but the judge's time gets cut short because in July, he received several phone calls. Stella would later recall that these phone calls really made him mad, and he had to rush back to New York City, and he was irritated. They were spending their summer here. They were supposed to be relaxing, and he was scheduled to attend a meeting the next day and needed to straighten some things out. So he's like, look, I got to run back home. Hang tight. Her birthday, Stella's birthday, was coming up on August 9th. And before he left to go back, he said, look, I will be back in time for your birthday.
What we know is that he was at his apartment that first night when he left. His maid was there, and he told the maid that he'd be returning to his summer home on the 7th. August 5th and 6th, he is confirmed to be at his office. He sent his secretary to the bank on the 6th to withdraw $5,150. In today's cash, that's about $83,000. During the morning of the 6th, Crater spends 2 hours going through his files in his judge's chamber. There are rumors out there that said he destroyed lots of documents. A lot of sources say this, but unfortunately we just can't confirm this. At noon, he asked his law clerk, Joseph Mariah, to carry 2 locked suitcases to his apartment.
So when he gets to his Fifth Avenue apartment, he tells the maid that she can go home for the day. And he says, I'm planning on going for a swim. You don't have to hang out. I'm good. Now, side note, Stella, his wife, remembers that her husband didn't really like to swim. So it strikes some people as weird because why would he send the maid away just so that he could swim? So, as you can guess, he did not go swimming. Instead, he goes and sees his friend, Joseph Gansky. Joseph was a broker who gave him tickets to a show that was on Broadway at the time called Dancing Partner. It had just opened the night before. Then he went to Billy Haas's Chop House at 332 West 45th Street. While here, he ate dinner with Sally Lou Ritz and William Klein. And William Klein was a lawyer friend of his, and Sally Lou Ritz was actually a showgirl. And Judge Crater actually had quite an affinity for showgirls, and he spent a lot of time with them.
The 3 friends left the restaurant approximately between 9 and 9:15 p.m. Crater then gets into a taxi. The thoughts are here that he left to go to the Dancing Partner show. Now, that is the story that the other 2, the showgirl and the lawyer, that's what they originally said. But later, they said that he just walked down the street because where the restaurant was, the theater was only a 10-minute walk. And this is the last official sighting of Crater. But to be honest, no one noticed he was missing at all. So his wife, after a few days of him missing her birthday, starts calling around, to the friends who were in New York, asking about, hey, have you seen Crater? Have you seen my husband? We haven't really talked. Nobody did. Because he failed to go to her birthday party or come see her for her birthday, she sends her chauffeur to the apartment to go look for him. There, the maid told the driver that Crater would show up pretty much when he showed up. She didn't keep his diary. She didn't keep his itinerary. She was like, look, he is who he is and he pays my check. He's going to show up when he shows up. But she did say that the plan was for him to go back to Maine, and maybe that's where he was. Now, Stella thought he was working, and all the court employees thought he was vacationing in Maine with Stella. So there's really a crosswire here. And there's got to be a history of this in the past for no one to go, hey, where is this guy?
So now it's August 25th, And the fellow justices are getting worried because they're back in session now and he's supposed to be reporting for work. And they're like, okay, this is really unlike him. Now we hear his wife is looking for him. And they started a private investigation to try to find him, but they couldn't find any trace of him. So on September 3rd, the police were finally notified. And of course, the media hears about it. They get a tip off and it blows up. It's front page news because, as we know at this point, he's been around some of the big shots. He's made a name for himself. So from August 6th to September 3rd, no one really noticed. I mean, they did eventually towards the end of August, but that's a long time for him to have, let's just say, gone somewhere, to have gone and had some sort of head start, if that is what happened.
The New York police were checking all reported dead bodies in hotels, and they did this to see if one of them just happened to be Crater. Nearly 100 witnesses were called to give evidence to a grand jury to provide evidence of when they last saw Crater and any other evidence leading up to his disappearance. The court captures 900 pages of testimony. His wife, Stella, which this is a little bit of an odd detail here, she refuses to participate in the grand jury.
They've got plenty of information, though. They've got all these documents. I mean, 900 pages of testimony. You've got the showgirl and you've got the other lawyer and all these people who saw him. There's a lot of information, but it just hits a dead end. There's, once they hit that point where, oh, we had dinner and then he was gone, that's it.
But even with that 900 pages of statements, the jury's final statement, they had no clue. The official statement read, "The evidence is insufficient to warrant any expression of opinion as to whether Crater is alive or dead, or as to whether he has absented himself voluntarily, aka he just packed up and left, or is the sufferer from disease in the nature of amnesia, so say he bonked his head and walked away, or is a victim of a crime." So they're saying they have no clue, essentially.
So during the investigation, detectives on the case discover the judge's safe deposit box, and it had been emptied, and the 2 briefcases were missing. So what this tells us is those 2 briefcases may possibly have been inside, and so they go looking, and all of his stuff in there is gone. The police received thousands of reports, sightings, tips. Some were false, some led to dead ends. But on January 20th, 1931, 6 months after his disappearance, things get a little interesting because Stella found envelopes that had checks, stocks, and bonds inside, as well as a note from Crater in a dresser drawer, which had been empty when searched earlier by police. So police come in, they're looking through his stuff, nothing's there. Then 6 months later, boom, there it is. And the letter was very brief. It basically just said, "I'm tired." That wasn't the exact words, but it was like one sentence that said, "Look, I'm just tired, I'm exhausted." And it was signed by him. And then that's it.
The water gets even more cloudy, let's say. Crater is not a faithful husband. He has been going out with a string of mistresses and enjoys the New York nightlife. Sally, remember her, the showgirl that he had dinner with, vanishes into thin air, and the police cannot find her to talk to her about Crater. She left New York sometime in August or September, so roughly the same window that Crater disappears. And we're going to find out where she was right when we come back.
Okay, welcome back from the break. So when we left off before the break, Sally had basically up and disappeared as well shortly after the time that Judge Crater did. It was sometime in the August-September range, don't know when exactly. And when she left, she had told people that her father had fallen ill and she was going to take care of him. So that was the story when they started digging around. She was finally found living with her parents late September that same year in Ohio.
She would be questioned about his disappearance 7 more years. When they found her in September, they questioned her off and on for 7 years. There is another showgirl. This is June Bryce. Now, she had also been seen talking to Crater on August 5th, the day before he upped and vanished. This gets a little bit confusing, so kind of stay with me here. June had a boyfriend. June's boyfriend is a gangster. The theory is that the boyfriend gangster was blackmailing Crater, and that is where the suitcases of money went. The gangster boyfriend killed Crater. So when the police find June, they're looking at her going, hey, we want to question you. Let's go hunt her down. They hunted her down, and she was at a mental hospital. So that's pretty much a dead end. Was she there to hide out, or was she there because she really needed to? That is a question that I cannot find the answer to.
Now for the third woman, there's another one in this story, and this is Vivian Gordon, and she is a very high-end sex worker. She is connected with a madam, that was the term at the time, Polly Adler, and Polly Adler basically ran the show. And
Polly Adler was actually an infamous madam in the New York Times during that time frame.
And this comes into play again in one of the theories. So Vivian was linked to a vast number of rich businessmen. One owned a large paper and was running shell companies for illegal things and all that. So Vivian was also seen around town with gangster Jack Legs Diamond. And Jack Legs Diamond was rumored to be friends with Crater. So Crater had known Jack Legs Diamond's former boss, who was an organized crime figure, Arnold Rothstein, and he had been really upset about Rothstein's murder.
So let's go to February 20th, 1931. Gordon is very angry about a conviction that had resulted in her losing custody of her 16-year-old daughter. Now, remember, Gordon is the very, very high-end sex worker who worked for the famous Polly Madam. Gordon goes and talks to a very high-up official within the city government to talk about government corruption. Now, the investigation into the government corruption launched in the wake of Crater's disappearance, and she offered to testify about what she knew that was going on. So she knew a lot about the corruption because she was sleeping with all these men, and they talked to her. She was murdered 5 days later after she goes and talks to this high-end government official.
And specifically, she was going to hone in on the police corruption. And that, to me, is interesting when we get to the end about theories. So she is going to talk about government corruption, specifically police corruption. She ends up murdered. Put a pin in that.
This made headlines around New York City newspapers, which led to the resignation of a policeman. But guess what, guys? It is now theory time. Since we don't have a body, we don't know where he is, let's discuss some theories about why he disappeared, or did he disappear?
So theory one, he just ran away. This is pretty straightforward. So it's around this time that Tammany Hall, a political organization specific to the Democratic Party, handled vote gathering. And corruption within this organization was rampant until Roosevelt put the hammer down on it. And so the theory here is that Crater could have disappeared to prevent testifying in the court proceedings around Tammany Hall, which he was set to do. To add to this, he was accused of buying and selling judgeships, and testimony would open him up under oath. So they're saying that he's got some under the book stuff going on here. And if he's under oath, he's either going to have to perjure himself or all of his ugly secrets are going to have to come out. And so he takes the money and runs.
So keeping with theory one, running away. But where does he run to? One thought was that he's living with a mistress because we know that he loved the women and they loved him. A running theory is that he cut ties with his old life to live out a new life with a mistress.
So the second part to that is something that came about in 1936, and there was a report that Crater was actually the gold miner Lucky Blackiet. And this person said that Crater was posing as this guy Lucky in Julian, California. So Lucky admits that he actually is Crater and told the police that in one more year he could be legally dead and hoped that he could stick it out that long.
So here's a little bit more on this Lucky theory. They're saying that he abandons New York, he goes to California and joins the gold rush. A person says, hey, this Lucky guy really looks like Crater. So they go out to California and this Lucky guy goes, yeah, it's me.
So they couldn't confirm that? I mean,
they could not confirm it at all.
I mean,
it's a wild goose chase is what it is. It's a wild goose chase. But
how much could the guy change over that amount of time? I mean, especially way back then, he could have lost some weight, gained some weight, dyed
It had
hair.
been a lot of weight to be added, to be fair, and a lot of gray beard to grow. Go to our YouTube video. You'll see the picture. He does look like Crater. But there's a lot of years of growth on his face that it couldn't possibly be. And the only reason why we're talking about this, because there was a report issued to the Bureau of Missing Persons 5 years before the sighting of Crater near Julian, and authorities went out there to talk to the local people. Several people did recognize the photograph of Crater, and one says, yeah, well, this Lucky guy is super well educated, and he's really bad at mining. But, could he be a doppelganger? Probably. He probably just looked like it, and this Lucky guy was probably selling his story and getting his kicks off of the notoriety.
I mean, I guess in my head I'm saying you should be able to confirm that. Now, I know there's not DNA, but ask the man to shave. I mean, ask his wife. There's got to be. Does he have any birthmarks? Come on.
I think that they went out there and they realized this guy was just a hoot. But it was a credible lead at the time. Because people were like, yeah, it's him. Well, it turns out it's probably just a really bad gold miner looking for some kicks.
Interesting. So, theory 2. He dies in Polly Adler's place of business. Now, keep in mind, Polly Adler is the madam in the high-end sex work trade. And this theory goes that Crater made it to the show that night, which was Dancing Partner. That was the name of the show. But he leaves before the second half, takes a taxi to Polly's place of business, enjoys the company there, and a rough draft of Polly's memoir reads that he died of natural causes in her place of business. And it goes on to say that when he died, quote, the boys took care of the body, which, think back to what we said a little while ago, she was tied in with the mob. So what she's saying here is that the mobsters took care of the body, disposed of him, because that opens up her business. If somebody dies there, there's an investigation. She's in an illegal field. But all copies of this memoir have been destroyed, and the theory cannot be confirmed.
So let's talk about theory number 3. He was just flat out murdered. This is the theory that most of New York City Police Department is going to hold on to. They think it's the most likely. Because Crater is set to testify about the Tammany Hall corruption. Crater, he was about to be exposed by this. I mean, all of his little dirty deeds and side hustles are going to be exposed during this hearing. So if he's going down, he's going to take everybody else with him. The thought was that he was going to spill the beans on everyone. So he was on top of the mob's hit list. Snitches get stitches. Stella believed that Crater was kidnapped and murdered. She is convinced that her husband would never run and hide from anyone. Now, this brings back into play June Bryce and her gangster boyfriend. Yet no strong evidence could be produced one way or the other on this. You've got a lot of corruption in the police department right now, and you've got a lot of corruption in the government houses, and pretty much from top to bottom. That's why Roosevelt was coming in, putting the hammer down. He was going to clean up New York because New York was being ran by gangsters at the time. I mean, we're straight into Prohibition. You've got a lot of this bad, illegal money laundering, and he's trying to clean it up. So could it be he was going to snitch and they took him out?
So to lend some credence to this, and this is where I said put a pin in it earlier. So on August 19th of 2005, yes, we are in 2005 now, lots of time has passed. Authorities revealed that after Stella Ferrucci Good's death, now this is not his wife Stella, this is another Stella. She died at age 91. Police received notes that she wrote. And her family found these notes in her safety deposit box, and they were labeled, "Do not open until my death." Inside were letters that she wrote saying that her husband, Robert Good, knew Crater's murderer. And she was told the story of Crater's death after having a few drinks with her husband. Also, some sources say that he said it on his deathbed, so not really sure what the official story is there. But Robert Good was a NYPD detective and worked with Charles Burns, who is another NYPD detective. And Charles's brother, his name is Frank, was allegedly the taxi driver that picked up Crater after his dinner with the lawyer and the showgirl.
Just pause to tie all of these people in so it makes clear sense. Random Stella, husband was a police detective. He had a partner. That partner's brother was the taxi driver.
The taxi driver, Frank, says that he drove a few blocks and slowed down to allow two accomplices into the taxi. So they pick up Crater. He drives 2 blocks, 2 other people get in the car, and they all drive to Coney Island, where Judge Crater was murdered, and Crater was then buried under the boardwalk. Now, this letter gave very specific details about the location. So this is awesome, right? There's a lot of details here. We can go find them. We can confirm this. Well, not so fast. The exact spot where they say Crater's body is the New York Aquarium. And that is big, massive. You can't just go.
Can't move a Shark Tank.
Exactly. And go digging for bodies there.
So, to be fair, they did find a lot of bodies when they were building the New York City Aquarium. In fact, I think they found like 5 or 6. But they did examine those bodies. The examination has not been complete as of yet, so we don't know if any of them are actually Crater.
Now, to be fair, some sources talk about these bodies being found. Others do not mention it at all. So I wonder, it seems weird that anyone would leave that out of talking about the aquarium, because it's such a, I guess, big lead that if they really did find bodies while they were building the aquarium, it feels like everybody should be reporting on that. But no official link to it being him has been made. So what happened to Stella? What happened to his wife, Stella? She just hears, "I'll be back for your birthday." Her husband is never seen again. Well, without his income, and we know he was a very wealthy man, she was unable to keep that Fifth Avenue apartment, and she was evicted. She petitioned to have Judge Crater declared officially dead in July of 1937. And she was reportedly living on $12 per week, which is about $240 nowadays, so not a ton. And she earned that as a telephone operator in Maine.
It was not until 1939 that he finally was declared dead and she was able to receive his life insurance policy. In today's money, that's going to be about $430,000. So she waited a very long time to finally be able to get his life insurance. In the middle of declaring Crater dead, Stella would find love again and marry Carl Kuntz. Now, he is a New York City electrical contractor. They lived in Maryland. And to make it even a sadder note, Stella would come into the same bar on the same day every year until her death and order 2 drinks. She would toast her husband before drinking her first drink, and then she would leave the second one for her husband. So she had this little ritual. Every year she would remember him at a bar.
So the thing that is weird to me, I can't help but think that Blackmail was somehow involved because of the money. He took all that money out and he took 2 briefcases to the apartment. If he was kidnapped and murdered, it seems weird that he would have taken money out before because he wouldn't have known.
Yeah, and they never did find the suitcases, too. So there's that missing link. I think if you could find the suitcases at that time, you could find who was connected. I do believe he was being blackmailed. He was a part of a lot of shady dealings. I mean, he was making so much money in a time where money was super scarce. He had 2 houses where people were in breadlines. You know, he was a Supreme Court justice. But as we said, New York wasn't really known for its ethics back then.
And it's also kind of strange to me, too. But we had talked about how one of those showgirls was going to testify about the police corruption, which is where we said, hey, remember that. And then all of a sudden, years and years later, there comes this letter saying, yeah, it was a police officer who killed him. That kind of makes sense.
But a cab picks him up. They could have known that he was going to dinner because the showgirl was connected right there. And so could she have tipped off?
Well, and the other thing is the lawyer and Sally, that original showgirl, they're the ones who said he got in a cab and went to the show. And we know, we said this, they ended up changing that story and said, well, no, actually, he walked. And so that seems weird to me as well. It's almost as if they potentially set him up, you know, and then in comes the police officers because he's about to be involved in this investigation and all the dirt's about to be spilled.
And then you always had that sensationalized theory. And we talked about this, about him dying at Polly Anders' house of business. And it seems to me, I mean, because I couldn't find the memoir, right? Because it had been supposedly destroyed, but someone had read it somewhere, and that's the theory that they're running with. But when they're talking about this, when they're publishing the idea and the theory that he died at a brothel, poor Stella. I mean, she's reading all of this about her husband. And I don't know, did she have a clue that he had all these mistresses?
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. That's really hard to hear. Even if she did know, that's still hard to hear if that's how he died.
And it's harder to read it.
Sure.
But sure. I mean, one says it's natural causes. The other one, you kind of wonder because, I mean, they're all mob related. They're all, but where's the money if that's the case? Because it wasn't at the apartment. So I'm leaning towards the blackmail.
And it could be one of those things where it was blackmail gone wrong. You know, he brings the money because they're like, look, you need to not talk or whatever it is for this investigation coming up. And something goes wrong. And
it just all seems to be centered around Tammany Hall. Because
Yes.
it was largely corrupted, and it was a juggernaut because they're the ones that carry the voting ballots from place to place. So, not saying they did, they had the potential with how corruption works to swap the ballots.
Right.
Then they could, and remember, Crater was picked over a Tammany Hall candidate.
Yeah, so you have some bad blood there anyway. So you're right, it does seem to center around that. And, it's one of those things where he could have just packed up and left, or something really bad could have happened to him. And it does. And I hate to say this because this is a very real situation, but unfortunately, it does sound like a movie plot. It sounds, and that's sad, but it's just so, anytime the mob is involved and money laundering and corruption and all that, it just seems so out there. But this stuff really does happen.
Yeah, and it's an interesting story. I really hope it's not him under the boardwalk. I don't think you can move a shark tank.
Yeah, you're not
just
going
to look.
Right. And I know we have equipment nowadays where you can scan, but I don't know if there's a building there, if that still works.
And you have all that water. I would think that would distort it. Because, if it was inside the aquarium and say it was like the lobby or something.
The case is closed at this point. It was closed in the 70s because even if he was alive when this happened, whatever happened to him, let's say he was kidnapped and held hostage, he would be probably dead by natural causes at this point. So it's closed at this point. But the whole mystery of what the heck happened is still very much out there. So on that note, I am headed to New York in 2 days. So interesting tie-in. Didn't plan that or realize that, but...
Are you going to go walk the boardwalk by the aquarium?
I might. And just look at it just to see. It's always interesting to see firsthand what we're talking about, And I love a good aquarium too, so...
I don't think I've been to an official aquarium.
Really? Ever?
Ever.
Oh, we need to fix that. You've been at Epcot, and I know that because I went with you.
But we didn't go to the aquarium.
Did we not?
No, we were too busy drinking.
What?
Sorry, what?
Drinking around the world. Oh, come on. That's why you go to Epcot.
Yes, and for the scorpion margarita.
That's right. That was legit.
That was very spicy.
Yes. And I will tell you ahead of time, there will probably be another off week at the end of October as well because I'm out of town again. And it's just hard when we're traveling because there's a day for recording, day for editing, and it's just gets... Yeah. And now that we have YouTube in the mix, it's just takes a lot of time.
I have jury duty. I'm super excited to go serve and complete my civic duty. I am really excited about it. And I will be honest, I will tell them I'm a podcaster because it's the right ethical thing to do, even though it's not required if they don't ask. But I don't want to be the reason someone gets out on appeal.
Absolutely.
So I will tell them I have come to terms with my ethics on that. And so I was supposed to be going in starting tomorrow, but unfortunately, the night that we're recording tomorrow, but they delayed me a week, so.
Gotcha.
I'll be there the following.
We'll see what happens with that. So that's interesting. I'm kind of on pins and needles for you. And then we're coming up on the end of September. So Patreon Live for the month of September is going to be on Thursday, the 29th, 7 p.m. Central Time. Like always. So if you're new to Patreon, we post the link that day, generally like 30 minutes before, so it's not floating out there. It's most of the time 30 minutes of story, 30 minutes of hangout time. We do record it, so if you can't make it, we post the video link and the audio link. If you would like to join Patreon, it's patreon.com/Corpus Delicti. You get stickers, pins, buttons. You get early access to the episodes when available. Now that we found new editing software, I've been getting them out there early, so I'm really proud of that. And they're ad-free except for podcast promos, which are like hardwired into our track. So, yeah, check that out. What else? We've got YouTube now. We've got TikTok now.
Lindsay has been rocking some TikTok.
Okay, so, I'm a little mad at TikTok because I made all these videos about Rocky and they had the music and they were really good. And then there's a freaking TikTok of my dogs that just took off. And I'm like, wait a minute. No, not that one. I posted it just for fun because, my dogs are cute. And there was a little filter where they had their faces look distorted and funny. And I was like, that's cute. I'll put it on there.
That's the one that went viral.
Liking the daggum dogs. But yeah, there's a lot of videos about Rocky. We're doing some of the episodes we cover, not all of them, because you can catch them on YouTube and here and all that. But some of them will be in condensed 1-minute form. So,
yeah, I think our YouTube's got like 12 viewers now.
woo! Yeah, killing it.
Hey.
We're trying new things, okay? We're branching out. It's been 5 years. We're only 5 years behind.
Oh, we got 23 views.
Nice. Yeah, we're crushing it over here.
We're crushing it. But I will say, Lindsay and I, when we first got started, we were so excited to get 25 listeners.
Oh, yeah, like total.
Even if they were by accidentally downloading the wrong podcast. We were excited.
Just because they misspelled something. Sorry.
Yeah. Misspell away.
Absolutely.
Anyways, guys, it has been so much fun. So I guess we'll see you not next week, but the week after. Super excited. Love for you guys to join us on Patreon. The more the merrier. We have some great conversations, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you're $3 or up, you can hang out on Discord, which we're chatting on there all the time, sharing pictures, true crime related